and Reed believed in giving hefty bonuses. When his companies did well, he had no problem rewarding his employees. Because of his generosity, people were very loyal to him. A part of Vaughn was glad he had decided to return. Although no comments were ever made about him serving time, he often felt there were those who hadn't been all that certain of his innocence. He hoped his name being cleared would remove all doubt. "With both you and Sawyer there," Deke said, pulling Vaughn's focus back to the conversation, "when I get the time, I plan to visit the cove more often to get some fishing in." "You do that. I owe you, buddy, for everything." "You would have done the same for me, Vaughn." Yes, he would have. A short while later, Vaughn ended the call with Deke. His friend had believed in his innocence from day one and had promised Vaughn that he would clear his name. When Vaughn was released from prison and decided to move back to Catalina Cove, Deke had paved the way by contacting the Cove's new sheriff, Sawyer Grisham, who happened to be a former FBI agent and a good friend of Deke's. In addition to Reed, Sawyer and Sawyer's wife Vashti, who'd been a classmate of Vaughn's, a number of former classmates had gone out of their way to welcome him back. His thoughts shifted to Camilla Elderberry, his girlfriend at the time he'd been arrested. The moment charges had been filed, she'd bolted and hadn't even waited for the trial. And then there had been Marie. She was the person he'd come to think of as his Marie. He'd never met her, but she had touched his life through her letters. She'd been part of the prison's inmate pen pal program, an agency that connected an inmate with someone on the outside who they exchanged letters with, whose sole purpose was keeping inmates motivated and encouraged while confined. He'd only received a total of 8 letters from his pen pal Marie, and they always seemed to arrive on some of his worst days, when he was at his lowest and needed motivation and encouragement. The letters had been a beacon of hope against the injustices that had put an innocent man behind bars. They had kept him positive, and that optimistic attitude was the reason he had been released after serving only 2 years of a 5-year sentence. The guidelines of the program prohibited the pen pals from sharing personal information, so Vaughn was fairly certain Marie was not even his pen pal's real name. The letters were delivered to him through the agency, and when he wrote back, they were delivered to his pen pal the same way. He definitely owed his Marie a debt of gratitude. And now his name was being cleared. Vaughn drew in a deep breath, feeling like a heavy weight had been lifted off his chest. Knowing he couldn't get back to sleep, he eased out of bed. One of the first places he went was to the dresser where he kept a packet full of important papers. He knew just what he was looking for. The letters he'd received from Marie, which he still read on occasion. Shuffling through the letters, he came to the last one he'd received, which was the one that had inspired him the most. "There are days that will seem hopeless, and nights that seem filled with despair. Always look forward to tomorrow. Brighter days are coming, even when it appears they aren't. You must believe. Marie." He slid the letter back into the packet with the others and put them in the dresser before heading back to the bed. With his name cleared, he had reason to believe that for him, brighter days were coming. Chapter 1. 3 months later. Sierra Crane cringed every time her ex-husband called. Their marriage had ended almost 2 years ago, so why couldn't he get on with his life the way she had gotten on with hers? She hadn't heard from him since the divorce, and now this was the second phone call in a month. And why did he always manage to call her at the worst time? The dinner crowd was arriving at her soup cafe, the Green Fig, and she was short a waitress tonight. The last thing she needed to be doing was talking on the phone to her ex. "What is it now, Nathan?" she asked, trying to keep her voice low to avoid being overheard by the customers coming in. "You know what I want, Sierra. We rushed into our divorce, and I want a reconciliation. We didn't even seek counseling." She rolled her eyes. It wasn't as if counseling would have helped their marriage. She had put up with things for as long as she could, and had to remove herself from that toxic environment. His infidelity had been the last straw. And then there had been his total lack of sensitivity when her best friend Rhonda Andrews was dying. "Why are we even discussing this, Nathan? You know as well..."